Hello, my name is Impichchaachaaha, Music Director of Caravanserai Music. Our upcoming concert on May 11th is featuring the music of American Indian composer Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. As a composer, he connects us to the raw emotions in his music in seconds. As a citizen of Chickasaw Nation, he translates the richness of American Indian culture into musical stories that any listeners of any background can relate to. While he is busy writing music for New York Philharmonic, Turtle Island String Quartet, and Seattle Symphony, he's generous to share his story and purpose with us today. Welcome, Jerod.
Hi, Impichchaachaaha hatak. Chickasha nompa okano sahol shifoa Jerod taloa ikbi Impichchaachaaha Tate. Chickasha saya. Chickasha inki saya. Impichchaachaaha choka michashawi iksa ishtang chaloli taloa ikbi li. Hashlaka asayopa chukmashki yakoke. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer. And I'm very, very happy to be here talking on this interview. This is really fun.
Thank you. And let's get right into it.
Yes.
So, how did you become a Chickasaw classical composer?
Well, I'll give you a little bit about my background. Of course, it starts with my parents. And so my father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Oklahoma. And dad professionally was a tribal judge and special district judge. And so dad was a lawyer. And my dad, his experience within Indian country law and history and politics is very, very extensive and very deep. And so I grew up with a really, really great knowledge of American Indian history law and culture and politics from all kinds of tribes all over North America. And so, but my dad is also a phenomenally trained classical pianist and vocalist, a baritone. And so I started the piano with my father, and then about 3 months into my piano lessons, I had announced to my family that I was to be a concert pianist. I was in, so I'm a classical pianist, as you can tell, and I went to school at Northwestern University and earned my piano degree there, and actually had begun my master's degree in piano performance at the Cleveland Institute of Music when I began composing. And that part of my story comes from my mother. My mother, Patricia, was Manx. And so I am Manx and Chickasaw. And my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer. And my parents met in the theater. And so between my two parents with classical music, I grew up with enormous exposure to ballet and opera and American theater and dance. So a lot of my early heroes in the fine arts were actually female choreographers, American female choreographers like Isadora Duncan and Martha Graham, Ruth St. Dennis, Ted Shawn, Agnes DeMille. And then later on, choreographers like Jerome Robbins and Bob Fosse and Alvin Ailey were very much part of my vernacular growing up. And of course, through all of that, my father sang opera, and so I knew a lot of opera scores and musical theater as well. Both my parents were total musical theater buffs, and but also, through the world of dance, there's an enormous amount of music that goes along with that. Of course, with modern American dance, there's a lot of modern music. So like in the 70s, I was listening to Moog synthesizer music at the time, is really, cutting edge stuff then. But also, I was exposed to what I consider some of the finest orchestral writing in our traditional ballets of, like Nutcracker and, The Rite of Spring and Romeo and Juliet, Je and Daphnis and Chloe. These kinds of orchestrations were normal to me when I was a kid. And so I'm very grateful for that. My mother staged and directed an entire performance of Soldier's Tale she choreographed and directed it with a live ensemble. And I mean, that was back in 1983. It was very rare for a person to listen to that. No less, my mom taught at the University of Wyoming. This was in Laramie, Wyoming, that we did this full stage production of that. And so, this is the kind of stuff that I was exposed to when I was a kid. And I was very, very fortunate about that. So, but also, there's another person, an author and historian and philosopher named Joseph Campbell, who was very famous. He did a lot of really famous interviews with Bill Moyers back in the 80s. But Joseph Campbell grew up Catholic and became a philosopher about cultures around the world. And he wrote the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and was really unifying and showing universal messages in folk stories from all over the globe. And I'm highly influenced by that. Martha Graham was very influenced by that. She'd really dived into the Greek stories and saw universal meaning in that, and her ballets were very steeped in universal meaning. And so, you know, I will say that that's what I love about our stories in Indian country is that there's so much universal value in our stories. They're legends, and I find a lot of comfort and creativity and exploration and just energy and life force in legends from all over the world. And so when I compose music, I really, really enjoy diving into our native legends. And the way that started was because when I was about to graduate from Northwestern, Mom was doing a new ballet, and she wanted to do a work that was based in stories from where she was teaching in Wyoming. And so she wanted to do a story based on American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies. And she created the entire architecture. She created a whole list of stories that she wanted included in the ballet. And she consulted with her native colleagues in that area about how to assemble that. So she came up with this whole architecture with that. And I knew she was doing that. I was always very aware of her process about how she put together projects and everything. And so, and then when she got done with that, she approached me and said, "Well, you're my Chickasaw pianist kid, and working so you can be the composer of this ballet." And so I thought she was absolutely bonkers for thinking that. And I actually told her no at first. It was very overwhelming, but it really stuck with me, and I began to compose in secret. And then I came to her with some music, and we locked in and decided to do the ballet. And so that was the ballet entitled Winter Moons. And actually, anybody can find that on Spotify and YouTube and listen to the Winter Moon score. That was my very first composition, was a ballet score from my mother. It's ironic. My Manx mother commissioned me to write a ballet about American Indian stories. So anyway, it was just really, really cool, just how all that came together. And so when I finished the ballet, I had a lot of very positive reaction and support from people from both my classical and native communities. And I just spent a lot of time thinking about it. Lots of people were telling me, "Jerod, you really should focus on this and do this." And so I spent some time thinking about it. When I went back to the Cleveland Institute, I took time off to go premiere the ballet and tour that. And then when I came back, I asked to add composition to my degree program. And so then I announced to my family that I was to be a Chickasaw classical composer. I decided to go ahead and focus on the development of American Indian symphonic composition. Very influenced and very inspired by who was alive at the time, Lewis Ballard, who was our symphonic composer at the time. He's Quapaw Cherokee from Oklahoma. He was very, very well known in Indian country. In fact, he was really close to our famous 5 Indian ballerinas from Oklahoma. And he composed a ballet back in 1967 called The Four Moons. And my parents were at that premiere, in fact, along with my grandmother, just the year before I was born. So Lewis Ballard was a tremendous source of inspiration and energy for that. And I was really fortunate. After I did Winter Moons, I went down to Santa Fe to see Lewis and show him the score. And he was very encouraging and very supportive about that path as well. And so I just had a lot of really, there was a lot that came together that I couldn't have ever really imagined, you know, when I was a little kid, how things like that can come together. And even now, as you know, I'm in my 50s, and when I was a teenager, I never imagined I would be doing the work that I'm doing, and having this type of energy and joy and focus and purpose and mission in my life. And so I feel very fortunate, very, very fortunate about all those great elements that came together. And, you know, my parents are responsible for that.
Mm. I love hearing how your background really influenced you, and then you took it seriously, and then you
Mhm.
became
Yes.
a composer that you never imagined you would be. And I
Mhm.
wonder, I always wonder about creators' process. So
Mhm.
how is your process when you start a composition?
Mhm.
And then also if you could tell us how you imagined composing Moonstrike, which
Right.
you're,
Yeah. That's absolutely. And I'll tell you the story about how Moonstruck came together, because that was really fun. Honestly, every piece that I write comes together in a way that's really positive and fun for me. And so, the way I write pieces is that I always have architecture first, and I will say I've learned that very much from my mother. She created the architecture of her works, and then would use that. I mean, she created the bones of that, and would use that as a guide to filling in how she would put things together. And my piano teacher at Northwestern University, Don Isaac, had a great influence on that as well, because the way he taught piano literature was, first of all, he always talked about how beautiful everything was. First of all, he would just play something, he'd be like, now, isn't that just absolutely gorgeous? And of course, the answer was always yes, it is, because art is beautiful all over, if no matter where it comes from. I mean, it's like humans make beautiful art. It's what we do. And his just natural language about always talking about how gorgeous everything is really affected me. But he also was the one that used architecture in composition, and it really stuck with me, because, like, if I was learning Beethoven, so I remember when I was learning with him, I studied Opus 81A, I'm sorry, the Lebesvold Sonata, the Appassionata, the Waldstein. I studied those, and then also Opus 110. And we always talked about the architecture of the works, and it had a profound impact, because when you play a work, you think about the entire architecture before you walk in the front door. And as the performer, you're about to take people on a journey, almost like you're going into a cathedral or any piece of great architecture that that you're about to show them all the nooks and crannies of what's going on, the larger works, the small things, all that. It's almost as if you're giving somebody a tour of actual architecture when you play a work. And so that had a tremendous impact on me. And of course, there's lots of artists who think like that. And so I think about architecture. Stories are very helpful when I focus on specific stories, from my tribe or other tribes. Well, the architecture is already there. Now, of course, I'm an artist, so I take license with that. But there's so many American Indian artists who have done the same thing way before I even started composing. So if you look at American Indian paintings and choreography and authorship, and just anything like that that's done in Indian country, and then compare that to anything from around the world and world history, it's all the same. There's architecture, there's a design, there's a meaning and a purpose of expression in every work. And I gravitate to pieces that I feel there's like this inevitable architecture to it. I really, really appreciate that in my own exploration of other art, no matter what genre it is. If it's film, I can feel I'm being pulled into the design. It's really neat. I respond to that. And so I try to have that sense when I compose a work. And when I'm teaching composition, because I talk about the very same thing. I'm like, okay, how are you going to begin and how do you want to end? And that could be any answer, right? But if kind of like your anchor points, then it helps you decide how you're going to go through that journey to get from here to the very end of your work. Many, many ways that can happen. And so I help them explore about how their design is going to be, their emotional story. I don't require kids to follow exact stories like I like to do often, but there's an emotional story. So again, it's like it gets back to the architecture, whether it's emotional, or if it's an actual specific story, or if you have like a real technique you're really focusing on, there's always an architecture to your expression.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
that's that answer. So
Yes.
you were asking about Moonstrike. Well, this was really fun. I got a call from Matthew Dietrich, who is the leader and the first violinist of the Apollo Chamber Players, a string quartet in Houston. And so it was a call for a commission, and we had the immediate fun conversation. He said, we're about to, they had done a whole series of commissioning 20 new works from 20 American composers, a great series. And oh my gosh, there's a lot of really good works in that. It's just fantastic. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that. And a friend of mine, Arthur Hernandez, had suggested that they call me. He was one of their commissioners, and I'm very grateful for that. Arthur suggested me. That was great. And so they said, we're about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And Matthew himself is a total spaceophile and just loves, everything moon, like everything NASA and everything, space exploration. And so, and we have that in common. My uncle Gene was actually one of the mission control people for the Apollo missions, and he actually built simulators for Apollo missions. And so I was really in touch with that as I was a kid, and I loved the space shuttle, and I always had all the paraphernalia and everything, all this posters, and so we were very much on the same page. It was really cool. So but he said we'd really like to do a piece, and he said, I know that you like to focus on native stories. Are there stories? I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many stories. And again, all around the world, there's stories of the moon. Why? Well, the moon's very important to humans. I mean, first of all, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of art we could ever have in nature. And also it affects us on a biologically, chemically, just, like with physiologically, everything. The moon affects us. And we've been aware of that for thousands of years. So anyway, so there's lots of stories around Indian country. So immediately I was thinking, oh my gosh, we could do a suite of stories. That was happening already when he was saying all this. And he said, and I said, yes, I'd love to do that. He said, would you be comfortable if there was, like, would you want flute or something? I said, I don't know about that, but how about a narrator? He's like, yeah, if we could have a narrator with this, telling the stories. I said, I'd love that. I mean, you can't beat the whole, approach of Peter and the Wolf, where you've got a folk story that's told by the composer from that, ethnicity, and that's a really great example. And there's lots of pieces like that, in music history, and so. Anyway, so we were just brainstorming, and so then he called back and he said, I was just wondering if there happens to be any like native, actors that that we could employ for this. And I said, I have a really good idea. A very good friend of mine is John Harrington, and he is a Chickasaw astronaut, and he is a saxophonist, and he does talks around them. He's very comfortable on stage. Let me put it that way. And I said, so it was just perfect. We have a Chickasaw astronaut telling stories about the moon with a string quartet in honor of the 50th moon landing. And so, and he's the one that's on the recording, and you can find this on Spotify. Everybody can listen to it there, but that's John on the recording. And I'm just, it's just all these things just kind of come together. I got to tell you, a lot of times I tell people I'm going to name myself Jerod Gump. I feel like Forrest Gump because I'm like, I have no idea how I ended up standing in this beautiful place with all these amazing people. It's just, I kind of feel like it's dumb luck sometimes, it's like, but I'm just really grateful that all these elements come together like this. So that was how this all came together. And so then, of course, they got to know John, and now Matt and John and the quartet are all very good friends, and they perform this piece together a lot around the country, which is really, really great. So, it's so fun when what I do is helpful in bringing other really good people together, and then new friendships are formed and relationships are created. That's neat and very fulfilling for that, because that's what life's all about. It's all about our relationships, that's how I feel about it. So anyway, that's the story of Moonstrike, and it's a really neat story. And I'm just so fortunate that Matt called, inquiring about this. That was really cool. So
Right. Yeah. And
yeah.
speaking of stories and how your love of like relationships between people and nature really translates to the music and the story of Moonstrike. So can you tell us that big idea, the structure of the
Mhm.
three stories that you feature in Moonstrike?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, I honestly, I was just kind of filing through my memory and doing some research on different stories. I was like, if we're going to celebrate, I'd like to celebrate as kind of a collective. And so the bookends are based on a Calusa corn dance. And so the Seminoles are part of we're part of the same culture, Muskogean culture, and we share that green corn ceremony. And so I wanted something that was kind of bookending that. That was my signature for my culture. And the green corn ceremony is really important because the moon and the phases, and the solstice and everything. And so that was just kind of like the spiritual framing of that. That was the bookends. And then inside, there's just those are just the three stories that I just kind of landed on, and then that were from different parts of Indian country, and also fit an architecture of like a fast, slow, fast. That's something I definitely wanted to do. The story, the Isleta story of the man who married the moon, is very dear to me. I love romantic stories, and I also like happy endings. They fall. I don't mind telling people that it's got, they do fall in love, and it's got, so I do like that a lot. And then the other two, the framing stories are about tricksters, basically. So Indian country, has lots of stories about trickster characters. And our tricksters are different for different tribes. So like for Chickasaws, our trickster is Chukfi, which is rabbit. For the Haidas, it's Raven is their trickster, and for Plains Indians, often it is coyote. And so those are kind of three major tricksters in North America: is the rabbit, the coyote, and the raven. And so I just thought that was really kind of cool to have those represented in there, because they're fun stories. There's like lots of little tiny micro lessons that go on in there. But trickster characters are really important. And actually, again, you find tricksters all over the world in world legends. The trickster is the character that challenges us. And so for both good and there's like both good and bad in the trickster, and not necessarily to be judged, but in life we're always faced with challenges that have different aspects to it, and some of them are uncomfortable and some of them are really, really positive and feel good, and they're all an important part of our growth. So the trickster, as annoying as the trickster can be, is very important to our development. And so a very important and blessed part of the creator's vision. And so that's where the trickster kind of falls. And I just thought it'd be fun to have like a coyote and a raven, and there's like kind of two tricksters that go on at the same time. But I love trickster stories. I think they're really fun. There's another work that I wrote for string orchestra called Chokfi, which is the rabbit, and that's my depiction of like the rabbit, and the different personality aspects of our. And so, but if you go back to a film that it was very famous in a lot of people's memory, but isn't shown anymore, but it's called Song of the South, and there was Briar Rabbit was a character that was taken from the Cherokee version of the trickster of the rabbit, and served as a trickster in that movie story. That was part of that was that the stories were partially taken from Native America. So anyway, that's a really old example that some people might remember of an American Indian trickster showing his presence in movies. And so anyway, that's what that's all about. So just honestly, I just kind of feel like a kid in a candy shop, and I just kind of think about things, and when something hits, boom, it hits, and then I can move on. So like the next piece that I'm writing right now for Dover String Quartet is a piece about our animals, and for some reason, I was thinking about which animals, woodland animals. We have our woodland animals. We have clans that are named after animals. So I'm the raccoon clan. Shawi Iksa is raccoon clan, and so I decided to focus on a specific set of animals for the Dover Quartet. It's like 5 movements that are all character sketches of animals. I really, really love doing that. So that's just kind of part of the ethos of what I like to focus on. But those animal stories are really important, and there's lots of animal stories in Indian country.
Right. Yes. And then that brings me to the next question, because I see that you like using tricksters to tell stories, and then these universal values you're trying to communicate.
Oh,
So I
if I may, I'm just realizing that I've got my Mando's Daycare shirt on. So my son is 10 years old, and so one of our favorite shows was The Mandalorian when it came out, a few years ago. And so I just love this shirt because it says daycare, bounty hunting, asset recovery. So this, but the Baby Yoda is really a trickster character, and that's why I just love that show so much, because he's very loving and very adorable, and also very mischievous. And so you notice the Mandalorian himself is going through personal growth and transformation with his child who's challenging him, and he's like frustrated, but he loves it. And it's really a beautiful relationship. But the Baby Yoda is very much a trickster character, and oh my gosh, I just thought The Mandalorian was brilliant. It was a very modern version of trickster stories. So I find that story very dear. So
all right.
but I think it's really important, because that's something a lot of people can relate to and go, oh, that's right. The challenge and the love all wrapped up into one. And that the episode where he finally meets the Jedi and she kind of discovers what's going on, that's when the relationship really starts to form, the bond, and he starts to accept Baby Yoda for what he is. And it's just awesome. I just love it. It's all relationship based. Yes.
Yes. And speaking of relationship, when I heard Raven steal the moon,
Mhm.
um, my focus was on the unfair treatment of the people in the story. And then
Mhm.
that made me think of, I wonder if this had any connections to the treatment of the American Indians in
Mhm.
our shared past. And
Mhm.
so, what do you think of that reaction, and what is
Mhm.
your own reaction to it?
Well, to be honest with you, it had nothing to do with that. It was just me just really enjoying and exploring all that. However, the thing is there are micro versions and macro versions of human challenge that happens all the time. And so I think what's really, really important for me as an American Indian is the idea of resilience and persistence. My ancestors walked 800 miles in mud across from Mississippi so that I could be alive, that my son could be alive, and that I could write orchestral music about them. It's really quite a circular story. And I think about that. And so what I do is the work that I do is in homage to my ancestors and their perseverance and survival in their challenges, and also to my cousin tribes around North America. My intention is to pay homage to them and to honor them in celebration in the music that, and like with these stories. And so I do believe, I mean, I think there's always lessons to be learned like that. And yes, trickster stories are really, really good examples for us to internalize and grow with, because we all face very large trials and tribulations in our lives. Everybody does. And of course, as a people, American Indians have, it's been, it's tough. And it's a very, very tough history. And we can feel that, and we can also take great pride, and we can really own our resilience and paint a great future. Our ancestors did that. They worked very hard for us to do that. And so we now have the ability to stand on their shoulders and do the same thing. And it's like I really think of that on a very human level too, because I love people. I love humanity. And there's 8 billion people on the planet, and there's 8 billion ways to be a person. And I love all of us. I really, really do. And so I think it's really important for us all to remember that we are the dreams of our ancestors. And I think if we can kind of take that loving approach, we can see each other with the same type of loving, be like, what? We're all here. We all have our superpowers. Let's combine them and move forward. That's the way I look at it, is that we unite our superpowers and make a better future for all of us. And so yes, I do find a lot of interconnectedness with what you're talking about. In the stories, I wasn't necessarily feeling, that, but you're right. I think that's a very good example of how to look deeper into something and take something away that applies to you as well. I think that's the whole purpose of our art. So I'm really grateful that you're thinking like that, and finding meaning on different levels in the artwork that I'm creating.
And thank you. I think that speaks to the power of your kind of music, because it brought out this all these sorry, uncomfortable feelings, and then maybe that like made me kind of felt angry, like, hey,
Sure.
this is not right. What's happening is not right. And then I hope other people can see that as like, hey, we should do something. Like you said, your vision is actually onto the hopes in the future and what we can create for the
Yeah.
future generation and make it better. So I really like that connection
Mhm.
in music. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And also previously you had mentioned that you're promoting your cousin tribes as well. So do you have other experiences and relationships with other American Indian tribes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm really, really fortunate about that. And that started very much with my father, because he was involved in Indian law and politics since he was a kid. And so through my dad, I just, gosh, by the time I was 20, I had met so many people from so many different tribes. And then I continued on a path with a group called Americans for Indian Opportunity that's run by LaDonna Harris, who's Comanche from Oklahoma. LaDonna and my dad are old buddies from when it was called Oklahomans for Indian Opportunity. This is an ambassadorial program that LaDonna has created for younger American Indians to come together and travel around Indian country and learn about each other. It's a really, really great kind of intertribal experience. And LaDonna had a tremendous long-term impact on my life with that. And the networking that she creates for American Indian youth from all different tribes is really quite profound and very unique. But that's a program that exists today. I mean, it goes on and it thrives. I mean, there's just hundreds of us that have gone through that program through Americans for Indian Opportunity. And so that you see, I mean, I've just had these incredible mentors through my life. You know, my father and my grandmother were great mentors. My grandmother went to the Chilocco Indian School here in Oklahoma, the boarding school in northern Oklahoma. And through that, she met all kinds of folks from all kinds of different tribes as well. And so she had a very cosmopolitan sense of Indian country as well. So with both my grandmother and my father, they just naturally just like, you know, created this flow of that sense of cosmopolitan feeling within Indian country. And so and then now my son carries that as well. He knows all kinds of people from different tribes. He feels very comfortable representing himself as a Chickasaw person when he travels with me around the country. And so that was instilled with me from my dad and my grandmother from a very early age. And I'm just fortunate. I've just got lots of friends around Indian country because of that.
And it's great to see that you're passing it on to your.
Yeah, yeah, and I love it. It's like, you know, it's really common. It's like Indians love meeting each other. We really enjoy it. And it's like, you know, not all. It's like I don't know everything about all other tribes, and so when I meet other folks from other tribes, I'm always like, oh, like I have lots of curiosity. We do lots of cultural comparison, language comparison. I mean, just like, you know, music and dance, all kinds of fashion. You know, just like all of our, you know, our cultural like traditions and ways that, you know, that each tribal government had. And it's like we're always talking and comparing, and it's really, really fun. And in fact, you know, you can do that whenever you travel anywhere around the world when you're comparing cultures. It's like, oh, that's really cool. But my dad and my grandmother just instilled this sense of fun and exploration and openness. And you know, it's like like to be just kind of bright-eyed and exploratory and open, and to discovery with other native folks around North America. You know, I just kind of grew up with that sense and that sensibility.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I love the curiosity you have. Just
yeah.
I think that contributed to your work because
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, those stories have become, they're so much fun. It's like there's so much to explore with that. You know, so like for instance, like a piece that I just finished just now was for City Music Cleveland for their chamber orchestra. And this is as one of the Shawnee native stories, and this is sung in the Shawnee language. And I have Shawnee friends here in Oklahoma, and so there was three members of the Shawnee tribe here in Oklahoma who translated the text into Shawnee, and so now the soprano Kirsten Kunkel, she's a Muskogee soprano. She's going to be singing in the Shawnee language. And so, see, this is a way for me to become even closer to my own friends. I met more tribal members from the Shawnee tribe through this process. Now they are going to all be able to go hear a work that's sung in their language with an orchestra in a way that's dramatic and theatric and, you know, kind of global, you know, in its feeling. And this is a story about Kokumthina, who is their grandmother, who created the land for and all the laws and the language for the new Shawnee people. A very beloved legend of their tribe is Kokumthina. And so that's what this is about. And so the soprano is her expressing her feelings about her new people and the love that she has. And I feel very romantic about all that. I feel very romantic about being an American Indian. I feel very deep, and I love being a Chickasaw man. I really love where I come from, and I have the same joy and love and enthusiasm for, you know, the tribes that surround me, that are my cousins. You know, it's I just have lots of love and joy about that. And so I like to try to share that and elevate other tribal members from different tribes as well. And, you know, again, it's like making that, like, you know, like kind of bigger than life, and like for the world stage. And it shows people our languages are still alive, our culture is still very alive. And it's like, you know, so when you see operas in different languages, you know, I mean, there's operas in Chinese and Russian and like in Latin and French and German. And I love having operatic presentations in our native languages as well.
yes, and this is really special because sometimes when somebody is really embracing their own identity, they can accidentally make enemies. But I love that you're making so many friends instead. Yeah, and that you're just your thinking is so inclusive, and you're thinking about how can we bring more people into like our inner circle, like everybody's our friend. And
Mhm.
in that spirit, I wanted to point out that like you're also father and teacher of music and Chickasaw culture to your son. So what world do you envision your son is gonna live in when he grows up? And how do we get there?
Well, it's like I'm really grateful that I am where I am because okay, so for instance, when I'll approach the language first, I'm an adult learner of the language, so I did not grow up speaking language, but we now have language immersion programs with the Chickasaw Nation. And since I live in Oklahoma City, my tribe is about 80 miles south of here, and so I take online classes. And in fact, there's a lot of native students who can take their own language online when they go out to college in another state, and that counts as their foreign language credit. So lots of American Indian tribes have a language online. So we have lots of adult learners of our language, which is really, really great. And I'm very proud to say that I'm part of that program. And so my son now speaks more Chickasaw than I did when I was a kid. And so that's really, really nice. Another thing that he embraces very deeply is our traditional sport of stickball, which is actually where lacrosse came from. That's where the original game is. And so we're going to another stickball tournament down in Tuscaloosa, Oklahoma here for the weekend. But he loves, it's his favorite sport is stickball. Really, really enjoys that. And so, and of course, he sings our songs. He knows our songs, and we go to stomp dances with the tribe as well. So he's a very natural stomp dancer and singer. And so he has just got a lot more than what I did when I was a kid. And a lot of adults my age have done this. We're doing that work to where our kids are exposed to much more. There's a lot of cultural revival in Indian country and around the world. So, like for instance, my mom's side is Manx. The Manx people come from the Isle of Man, which is off the east coast of Ireland. And there is a huge Manx cultural revival as well. They are all learning their songs and dances and their Gaelic dialect as well. And it's really, really strong. I mean, it's like the Maoris down in New Zealand. It's like, there's a lot of adult explosion and of revitalization of their language. When I went down to work with Maori composers in 2015, I met a lot of adult men who grew up in boarding schools not knowing their language, and now they're fluent, very tattooed up. They didn't do haka. They didn't do all the stuff that Maoris are very famous for now. And now they do. They're middle-aged guys doing this, and their kids know more. You see, this has happened all globally. It's really, really cool. And I love knowing that as an American Indian, because I feel like I'm in great company with all kinds of people, around the planet. It's really cool. And I like to speak of it on that global scale, because I think when we realize that we all absorb a different energy, like we can all be a part of that, and we all come from culture. We all come from some tradition of some kind, and we all have a birthright to those cultures. And so I just encourage people, I'm like, gosh, just learn. This is the time. It's happening, and it's happening all over the planet. So that's what I have. It's like, so I really enjoy that my son is learning all this with all of his Chickasaw colleagues that are his age. And to him, it's very, very normal. There's no a struggle with that. It's just natural, and he has lots of pride, and I'm very proud of him. My son sang on the Carnegie Hall stage with me a month ago, and we, just with great pride and dignity, we sang with the orchestra our traditional Garfish dance song together at the beginning and the end of this orchestral work. And he's just up there singing it very easily, no problem, without hesitation. And I'm really proud of that he has that ownership and just agency over his own heritage.
So are you saying the future you envision is already here?
It's yeah, of course, yeah. Look, yeah, we're all part of it. See, I don't really see time much.
Mm.
It's all continuous. And if you think about all of us, all of our ancestors, 5,000 years ago, we're having the same conversations, and especially about parenting. They were having the same parenting conversation, right? See the smile on your face as everybody gets that. See, that's how we're going to connect with aliens, is when we start telling parent stories with each other with aliens. We're going to connect right in, and that's going to be the universal language is parent. See, so but see, it's a really beautiful thing. And so when we think about how back then, it's like all art then was modern art. All politics was modern politics. Fashion was modern fashion. Our languages were changing. We were exchanging culture from our neighbors. This was happening all the time, and it was very robust back then, as it is right now. So I just don't see, I see it as a different set of challenges, but I mean, time to me is the same. It's like we exist back then as much as we do in our future. So I find a lot of hope and optimism with that because you and I are here. This is our chance. I mean, we're living that. We're making a daily decision as to whether or not it's going to be a positive chance and so this is opportunity. Every single day that we wake up, we have opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Then I have a question that happened in the past, but then now is still relevant, which is
Yes.
cultural appropriation.
Mhm.
Where Caravanserai Music will be performing your work alongside
Mhm.
Dvorak's Serenade. And
Mhm.
we have heard recently that Dvorak, when he advocated for
Mhm.
African American and indigenous
Mhm.
themes,
Mhm.
he essentially is giving authority for white composers to freely appropriate
Right.
their music. So,
Mhm.
how do you feel about that?
Well, okay, first of all, Dvorak musically and artistically is a symphonic hero. I mean, just an amazing artist. And what he did and expressing his ethnicity very clearly in his music was absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. And so I think that his spirit was definitely great. It was very positive, and he was trying to give positive encouragement in the way that he knew how. Makes total sense, right? And I think that in and of itself is very, very beautiful. Now, did he know anything about the cultures that he was speaking of? No. He didn't know a thing about it. Also, he didn't know, and the world didn't really know how to interpret America as a country. And America is still finding that out. I mean, if you think about, we had this conversation when I was working with the New York Philharmonic. I had a panel discussion with other composers who are from different ethnicities as well. And it was like, what is the American sound? And I said, actually, the question should be, what isn't the American sound? And America has been unique in its kaleidoscope that it was a long time ago, and it is only getting more complex. And the way through it is to dive into that complexity, to try to say, well, what's going to be, it's impossible to narrow it down. It's just not going to happen. And that's the part that Dvorak didn't quite understand, but he had no way to understand that. He just, I think he was just trying to give lots of encouragement for a brand new something, some type of evolution in the arts. He was right on that front because you had composers like George Crumb and Charles Ives and Henry Cowell that were coming out, and John Cage. I mean, these American folks were definitely challenging the entire musical landscape in ways that, altered the world, really. So so that was going to happen, and it was happening. That was just all inevitable. And so, and I think he was just trying to give a lot of positive energy, to America at the time. And that's all really, really great. But his Ninth Symphony doesn't have one native or ethnic theme in it. It was all from him in his mind. They're beautiful melodies, and the works are great. In fact, I'll tell you a story. I played the trumpet when I was a kid, and I played the Ninth Symphony. I was playing on a B flat instrument for E flat trumpet, so I had to transpose a tritone, which was great for my musicianship. I loved that work. I thought it was fantastic. I had no idea at the time what it was about. I had no clue. So I was just like hearing the sound and going, wow, I remember the orchestrations and how beautiful they were and all this kind of stuff. And it was, very exciting, really, really great. You want to talk about great architecture and composition. I mean, that was a really good example of a very, very finely written symphony for sure. Very emotional, theatric. It really appealed to my theatric sense, that I grew up with. And I felt story in that. And Dvorak is very much like that, in his own, just in his natural writing. He's very story. You can feel his architecture and his story in his music. This is why I'm very attracted to it. But I had no idea. It wasn't until later that I found out, and I was like, "What?" And I'm really happy. That's the part of the Forrest Gump part that I tell you is like, I have no idea where I'm standing. I'm standing in all this greatness. I don't really know how to recognize what I'm standing in. And I'm kind of glad that it was such a raw, like there was no, uh, predisposition that was given to me. I was just able to take the music as a good composition, and I didn't have that bias going in and listening to it. And so I'm really grateful for that because I own that work in my mind very differently than that narrative. That narrative doesn't belong in my listening to that piece. And I'm very glad because it's not American Indian at all. I mean, it has absolutely no influence on me as an American Indian composer. I would say there are other composers who have higher influence on me than that, than Dvorak's Ninth Symphony. And so the Serenade, like his American quartet, well, it's not American, it's Dvorak, it's totally Dvorak, I mean, so it's all very, very beautiful music. But I think the history is absolutely there. He had made this discussion, he had proposed, that whole thing. I think that's fine to talk about. It's real history. He existed and he said those things, and he wrote this great music, and that's all fine. So I don't feel like a sense of like ooh or ick or like, oh, it's interfering with me or upsetting. It's fine. It doesn't bother me at all. There are all kinds of artists and composers who have been influenced by certain things in their lives, and then this output comes out. Debussy is a really good example. Debussy was highly influenced, when he heard music from the Far East, and that it completely changed his way of thinking of how to orchestrate. And that was a real influence, really, really happened. It really struck him as an artist and changed how he thought of orchestrations. That was real. That really happened. And so I don't see him as an appropriator. I see him as somebody who is a product of the world coming together. I mean, my gosh, look at Spotify. I am highly influenced by Spotify. Look, you know who a really influential composer was to me in the 80s was Peter Gabriel. And it was because of his sense of his ethos, his really deep writing in whatever he created. There was something about that, his rich approach to everything that really had a great impact on me. Peter
Mm.
Gabriel. Another great Motown had a great influence on me because the studio work in Motown is incredibly rhythmically tight. I mean, gosh, those productions, that writing and the performing in Motown studio work is unbelievable. I mean, so tight, has a very big impact on my writing. I like things to snap into place. I really, really like that. I got to tell you, Motown had a great impact on my writing with that. Got to say it. So, am I culturally appropriating from Earth, Wind, and Fire? I don't think so. I'm not trying, I'm not Maurice White. I'm not, going to try to sing like he does or, try to write kalimba music like they have in some of their, in some of their writing, from the I Am album and, In the Stone. And I mean, this is stuff I'm really familiar with, but I am highly influenced and affected by their musicianship for sure, because they're part of the American fabric, but I don't, and they taught me I like it when things like really like lock into place like puzzle pieces like Legos. I really really liked that, and they had a great influence on me. One of my first concert ever was Earth, Wind, and Fire when I was a kid.
Mm.
In Denver. They came to Denver, and I went to hear Earth, Wind, and Fire and the Commodores. I heard the Commodores the next summer, and these people had a great impact on me. I listened to Jackson 5 like crazy. It was like, this is real influence on Jerod Tate.
Wow, that's like
Oh, it's one of the reasons why I love the Trolls movie so much, is because I feel like Justin's Timberlake homage to Motown was just awesome. I just loved it. I was like, yeah. And it's like, Frozen, the music, music to Frozen 2 is a major homage to 80s music that had a great influence on me. And so I'm just like looking at these other musicians going, yeah, this is so, I just feel like I'm surrounded by colleagues of life, and experience. And I feel very joyous about a lot of things that go on in the artistic world. And so that to me is my I guess, foundation of feeling for sure. And now, yes, there are circumstances absolutely in which somebody is dishonest and somebody is cashing in, and this happens in every walk of life. Absolutely 100%. My focus is all the basic joy that I have with people like you and other colleagues in which we're sharing a wonderful human experience very authentically, for sure. And we're riffing off each other, we're bouncing off each other's positive energy, that positive influence that we have on each other. That's what I focus on in my daily life.
Now I see the genius of you and Forrest Gump being open to accept and whatever comes, right? And that's what like gives you optimism and then gives you just energy to like be better humans. And I love
Mm.
that comparison. So I think it's a positive comparison.
I hope so. I hope so. That's what that's what I'd like it to be. I'd like to help with positivity. I think leading with love is a very, very good place to be.
Right.
Mhm.
So what are some upcoming projects that excites you?
Oh, well, okay. Okay, so we're talking about language. Well, my opera entitled Loxi Shali, which means shell shakers. This is our traditional percussion instrument is the turtle rattle, and Loxi Shali is the carriers of this of the turtle shells. So our women in our tribe have bundles of shells around their legs, around their calves, and they stomp on the ground and create a 16th note shuffle rhythm, and that's our percussion sound for when we do our stomp dancing around a campfire. So this, and we also have handheld rattles as well. But so the turtle rattle is a very important part of our culture. My opera is entitled Shell Shaker because it's about the story of a young Chickasaw girl thousands of years ago, who it's a hero story. She's finding herself and her own voice within her community, and she ends up going to the forest to discover what she needs to. Lots of people do that. Uh, it happens to Luke Skywalker. He has to go to the Force to find his dad and face what he has to face and everything. It happens a lot in the Firebird. You go to the forest. Everybody goes to the forest to find themselves, and so she goes, and it's when all the animals teach her all the culture, and then the grandfather turtle that she meets gives her the shell to take back to her people, and they add that to the stomp dancing, and it completes our culture. So she is a legendary hero of ours, and so it's a perfect two-act opera. And so my opera Shell Shaker is premiering here in Oklahoma City on October 27th as a concert opera. We're singing with Canterbury Voices and the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. And we have four major American Indian opera singers that are playing for the lead roles. Caitlin Morton, who is Cherokee, Kirsten Kunkel, who is Muskogee, Mark Billy, who is Choctaw, and Grant Youngblood, who is Lumbee. They're all singing four of the major roles in the opera. It's all sung in the Chickasaw language. And so my colleague, Lokosh Joshua Hinson, is the translator for that. And so he and I have created a libretto in the Chickasaw language, and that's what's being sung here in October. So I'm very proud of that. So we're talking about language and putting that on the stage, and done that with I actually have other choral works in the Chickasaw language that have premiered. One premiered at the Kennedy Center back in 2005, and that was all in Chickasaw. And you can listen to that piece Iholba on Spotify as well. And so that's just something I'm very proud of. That's coming up here in October. And right now, I am in the middle of composing two quartets for the Dover Quartet. And so I'm writing fast and furious because I'm pushing deadlines, of course. We have we have a big administrative call tomorrow that we're talking about, like when the actual premiere is and what the schedule is during the year and all that stuff. And so, but that's the piece and that's the one I'm telling you about is about the different animals that I'm doing that one. And then there's another arrangement that I'm doing for the second quartet. And so those are two works I'm doing right now. And I just finished the Coca-Cola work that'll be premiering with City Music Cleveland. And then there's another work coming up with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic that we'll premiere next April. And that will be sung in 6 different tribal languages from Oklahoma. And so I'm just really leaning into a lot of language these days.
Well, speaking
Yeah.
of language, could you
Mhm.
teach us how to say simple things like hello and goodbye
Yes.
in Chickasaw?
Absolutely. So we have a word in Chickasaw that means good, and it's chukma, and the word it just literally means good. And so it's almost like Hawaiian, like aloha. When you say hello to somebody, you say chukma. And if you want to say how are you, you say chin chukma. Chin is you. How are you good? And you would say an chukma. You say yes, I'm good, and you say ishnako. And you say, or how about you? And you say, Kanika chukma, I'm doing very, very well. So if you wanted to have a full greeting, you could say chukma, chen chukma, and then you say an chukma, ishnako, kanika chukma, chukma.
Kokma.
So there's a lot of chukma. So that we have a language that squishes together. We have words that are conjunctions, lots that bring words together in one word a lot, and so that's the kind of the style of our language. And so there's one way if you want to tell somebody this, I love this, you can say when you say I love you, Chihololi. Hololi is to love. Hololi is I love. And Chihololi means I love you. She is for you. So Chihololi. And so if you're trying to get your kids up in the morning, you can say Nitaki Chukma. That means it's a good day. Chukma is a Nitaki. It's a new the morning is the day is Nitaki and Nitaki Chukma. And so those are some phrases that you can hopefully remember.
Yes, I'm gonna practice so I can say that.
Yeah, if you want your kids to get up, okcha means get up
Oh,
now. Okcha.
yeah, that'll
Choshma,
wake me up.
choshma, it means hurry up. Okcha. So
Cha.
those are some commands you can learn.
Very
So
good.
when I see Hiloha, when I pick him up from the car rider, I'm like, Chukma Hiloha. And he's like, Chukma Anki. It means hello, my dad. Anki. Inki is dad. Anki is my father. Anki. So Inki. So I am Inki. So yeah. Inki is father. Yeah. And mother is Ishki. Ishki. And so Ashki, that's Sashki. Sashki is my mother. Sashki. So
Such.
yeah. And then my son is Oshi. So I said Shukma Oshi. So yeah, so that's we'll greet each other when we get in and out of the car. So
All right. Well,
and you wanted me to sing you a song, and I'd be very happy to do that
yes,
as
I
well.
would
So
love to
since
hear
we were
that.
talking about the turtle rattle, so this is our shaker. And so so the song that I'd like to sing for you is a very ancient garfish dance song that I love to sing because I had learned this from my cousin Bynum. And this is actually the beginning is what my son and I were singing with the orchestra at Carnegie Hall just last month with the American Composers Orchestra. And this, so I love the opening because it's like this calling. It's really, really cool. But we have garfish is a fish that's really prevalent among all the southern states in the United States. And so, and gar is and so we have lots of animal songs. So garfish is one of our songs. So I'll go ahead and sing this for you. Yo lene, yo lene, yo lene, yo lene, you ho, hey! Way I only, way ah, way I only, way I only, way ah, way I only, I only, way ah, way I only, I only, way ah, way I only, only, way ah, way I only, only, way ah, way I only, hey, way I only, hey, way I only, you hey! Yo lene, yo lene, yo lene, yo lene, hey! All right. So now that song, it's just because I'm a solo act, I'm singing the whole thing. But if you notice, it's a very call and response. It was repetitive over and over and over. And so that part that was way I only, that's the lead singer. And then the group sings back, way I only, way I only, way I only, I only, way I only, I only, way I only. And so that's actually, you were talking about possibly teaching somebody online. Well, I just taught you the song. So you can sing that as a group. So if you see me appearing, I will actually have the audience sing that back because it's a really easy response to learn. And so we just do that as a group. So I'll sing the beginning and then they sing the call and response. And so call and response is very, very common for Southeastern American Indian music, which had a very big influence on the jazz and blues. So you can imagine it's like, so the mix of African American and Southeastern American Indians was very significant back in the day. And we all influenced each other in our culture. So if you look at the Irish fiddling, the African influence, and American Indian influence, all three of those contributed very heavily to our current forms of jazz and blues and pop. Very much. Yeah.
Wow, I've learned so much.
Lots of it, lots of cross influence in that mix. A lot of it. Really cool, very unique. Very, very unique.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I wish I could keep talking to you forever, but we're busy.
I'm just
And,
like, blah, blah, blah.
and we're so happy. Like I learned so much, and I'm really excited for our audience to hear your music and learn like these optimism that you're like just it's coming through in your music. And then just this the tune you were just singing, like it just makes my blood move and my body just wants to like feel all of this together. So I'm hopeful that, if we listen to your music, we're bringing people together, and then we're hopefully going to make a beautiful future together as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I ask of all the listeners, please enjoy these stories and just let your heart just get into it and just have fun with the exploration of the stories.